Welcome to the Exit Ready podcast. Ryan Ray here as always. Today you're going to love the episode. Be sure to never miss what's going on with the Exit Ready cohort intensive by going to www.rgahub.com/exit ready. That's rgahub.com/exit ready. I'll put a link to this in the description below so you can check it out. But if you're an owner, you're not going to want to miss this. Now, let's get to the show.
Kurtis, man, it's good to have you on today. How's it going, bud?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Okay, give a quick introduction of kind of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. I started a business where we do fractional CFO work for mainly B2B service businesses. And before that, I was a CFO at SMBs and was involved in a lot of transaction stuff at that level on kind of the day-to-day level. And then since that point, we've transitioned to helping people with their finances in the fractional CFO. And so that's a little bit of my professional background.
Okay, so two terms there, just unpack. Fractional CFO, what
Yeah.
does that actually mean? What does it do? And then SMBs, how do you define that?
Yeah. That's a good question. So SMBs, to start out, I the business I started in when I first went into it, I was a you know 2 years out of college, and so it was
Yeah.
really a business under $10 million that I came into, and it was me and two other people that were trying to figure out the finances. And within 2 years, we grew over 30 million in revenue, and I had to mature and you know, be a big boy, like whatever. So
Yeah.
when I think SMB, I think really anything under 100 million, but I think really in revenue, but I think really you're talking south of that, less than 50 million. Really, even the majority of that is built off of that, say, $5 to $30 million
Yeah.
company. And I think that's kind of the bread and butter of what I would call SMB. Um, so that is kind of the definition there for that. And fractional CFO, what I like to say with fractional CFO is a lot of people get it confused. And you see a lot of bookkeepers, a lot of CPAs saying that they're going to be your fractional CFO or they're going to be your CFO. And my opinion of that is most of them don't have the experience of having sat in that seat and having hard conversations with a business owner. Um, and to me, that is what a CFO is it's the person that can sit side by side with the business owner. They can have strategic conversations, have hard conversations, be their right hand person in that decision making process. And so when you look at what we do from a fractional CFO perspective, I look at us as we're not doing bookkeeping. We may be building some financial models and cash flow, but our ultimate goal is to help you make more money, give you confidence so that you can make better decisions by getting you the data that you need, and then ultimately improving cash flow. If we can accomplish those three things, we're going to do whatever we can to help you accomplish those things. And so, more than anything, it's an advisor over a tactical job. And that puts us in a spot where we get to really help businesses that are struggling get big wins and then continue on down the path.
It's a need that I think more companies should fill. They probably don't need a full-time CFO, but they definitely need a fractional CFO. You think about your CPA, you talk to them, a few times a year. You might have a bookkeeper or someone in house that's kind of doing some
Yeah.
stuff for you. But this role, you probably don't need a full-time one. You might, but you definitely need someone to come in and have those conversations with you. And why do you think that more owners aren't outsourcing or hiring fractional CFOs?
Yeah, I just think most don't know what it is or what's out there. I think a lot of people have in their mind the kind of old school model where some guy comes sit in your office for 1 to 2 days a week, and that they'd be, you know, kind of a help, but they'd be mainly doing transactional level work.
Mhm.
I think the reality is small businesses, especially, it's a lonely thing. And I think honestly, business owners are just grunting away doing the work. I think they think about it, and I think they struggle to see where a consultant like us can bring the value. But in every situation we're in, we can do ROI analysis, and we can say, like, we have brought you more value than our costs by a magnitude, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing is like you're in SMBs, especially, you're in a reactionary and you don't understand what it is. And I think the biggest difference is, like you mentioned, the CPA. The CPA doesn't really know your business. They
Mm.
know the tax impacts of your business, but they don't most of the time really know your business. The first thing we do as fractional CFOs is we sit and we try and understand your business model, right? And so it's only through understanding the business model that we can be that advisor. And so I think that's what makes us unique. In opinion, like in my opinion, we're unique in some of that. You have to have the right sort of person to do that the right way, and that's something that I think businesses realize they need. I just don't think they know that it's out there.
Okay, so have you heard the term like a bleeding neck offer?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so give me an example of like a bleeding neck offer, someone like not an offer per se, but a situation where someone like they need a fractional CFO right now, and then on the other end, someone who doesn't have one, but it would be nice to have one. So give me maybe two or three from that end of the spectrum, so people
yeah.
kind of understand
Most
where they're at.
Yeah, yeah. Most people that come to us, it's because they're having cash flow issues, meaning they're running out of money. And this business owner thinks that they're on the verge of bankruptcy. And so what we do is we come in and say, we think your business model is good. You can make these handful of changes and we can get you back to where you're on solid footing. So when I think about that, it's cash flow issues, it's massive growth to where you're encountering things that you've never encountered before, and you need someone to go through it with you and help you navigate it from a financial standpoint. So if you don't have experience with banking, we do. If you don't have experience with pricing, we have experience with pricing. If you don't know how to do financial models, if you don't know how to manage your cash flow, those are all things that we're experts in, that we can help you not make mistakes that people commonly make. And that's kind of the big thing is like, we can help you accelerate that growth or that lack of failure, not fail. We can do that because we have the experience and have sat in the seat and done it with other companies.
And so I think a lot of owners have issues and they think they're unique to them. But how common is it when you talk to an owner that they have these issues you just
Yeah,
described?
dude, it's every single owner, and I've had these conversations. Like, honestly, like I posted about this on Twitter the other day of like, so often business owners get in their own way when it comes to success. And because we get to know them personally and we get to have those conversations, we can often lay out information in front of them and also speak to the things that they're struggling with. Um, so that, because oftentimes business owners struggle with decision making sometimes. And a lot of that is because they don't have the right data information available. And so if we can help assist in making that right information available, then we can help them make better decisions along the way.
Yeah, I think part of that's tied into there's a lot of education on how to scale, how to grow, and it's like, okay, make more sales, increase your margin maybe, and stuff like that. It's kind of like, well, that's great, but there's these other issues that come up that people just kind of overlook. And then two things get overlooked, I think, especially is that not all owners are fit to serve all size companies, right? So if you think about a commander in a battlefield, maybe he's great at, taking a certain, a group of men and accomplishing a certain objective. That doesn't mean that same person can lead the entire army, right? Maybe he can, maybe he can't. And so we talk about scaling. It's like, well, what are you fit to do? But as you go up, you got to understand that you need people like a fractional CFO or whatever it is to help you make those decisions, because that same person, as they go up, become a general, they're going to have a lot of staff that helps support them. And that kind of gets missed, that as you grow, that you have to have this support staff in place to help you get there, or, one person can't do everything. We think of like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these big people. I mean, they got a huge staff. And so they don't not masters at all this stuff. The other thing is there's rarely talked about the end goal in mind. Like, how much do you actually need, to retire? And so you think about selling your business or making it exit ready, is what I like to call it. What does that even look like? And from a standpoint of, looking at your finances and saying, okay, well, how do I make this business as attractive to a buyer as possible? Probably also makes it the best to run as possible. And then you can sit down and start to begin to ask, okay, well, okay, I think I need X amount of dollars. The business is worth, Y. I need to grow it to this spot. You understand the math on how to make that happen. And I kind of think about it like this. There's two sides of a problem. There's the math problems, which we can solve with math. And then there's people problems. And those are kind of unique to each person. Like they have their own strengths and weaknesses. But if you don't know the math side and you're only focused on the people side, you're really going to scramble a lot because you don't even understand what you're trying to do. And so a lot of this is just tied to not knowing the basic, I say basic, I can't do this math, but the basic math for you to understand where you're trying to go.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of it comes down to systems. I think when you talk about exit ready and that focus, um, you have a lot of people who have just done stuff one way for a long period of time, and all of a sudden they're experiencing growth or they're trying to get to the point of exit, and they think that they have a certain amount of value there. But then the reality is a lot of that stuff is not repeatable to the next piece, right? And so one of the big things we come in is we can almost always, I can't think of an example off the top of my head where we haven't been able to help people um, get more money in their bank account, either through loans or through improving their collection process. And a lot of that stuff goes to they setting up the foundation really, really well. And so because we've set up that foundation a lot of different times and we've gone through those exercises, um, again, there's very common things like the cash flow issues, like pricing issues, margin issues, like cost and expenses that they don't have. I always like to tell them, we can be the bad guy. You can say, I have to cut this because of these people, right? That's okay, right? And so a lot of times you the business owner is 100% capable of doing a lot of what we do, but it would take years of learning and a process of failing through that. Whereas hiring people that are better and further along at that specific discipline can be a game changer for that business owner, because you get, I like to think about like business is like a gradual growth, like because you have to go through the process. The only way to get past that gradual growth is to get step changes, is to bring other experts and people in that can take you the next level, the next step up. And if you're constantly just relying on you, you can grow and you can be super, super successful. But at some point, you're going to hinder where you had an opportunity for a big step jump because you weren't willing to hire or work with someone else.
Well, and you mentioned debt there. And so debt puts pressure on you as the owner because now you have to pay that. Whereas payroll, you could lay people off or whatever to kind of reduce that if you had to. You don't want to, but you could. The debt you got to pay back, like they're coming.
Yeah.
And so if you have cash flow issues and you don't understand how to balance out, lower your collection cycle, as you mentioned, or how to increase your margins or stuff like that, the debt becomes a heavy burden that you have to carry. And oh, by the way, if you say, well, I do want to exit or I want to grow or whatever, understanding how the debt's going to play into that is really important. Like I mentioned, there's kind of two, there's the math side and the people side. If you don't understand the math, and so when you see the debt coming in with owners, how much extra stress do you think they're taking on because they just simply haven't sat down and said, okay, well, let me run a few models and see what this looks like here and what this looks like here to understand what the actual implications of what they're thinking might pan out to be.
Yeah, like when we talk to people that we've worked with, the number one piece of feedback is I can sleep better at night because I have a peace of mind. I think that's a lot of it is they're worried because they're not the expert in the area, that there's some unknown boogeyman that they don't understand. And so in a lot of ways, half of the service that we provide is the peace of mind that they have someone who knows it in and out and is giving them the right directives and right steps to make to reduce that risk, because you never get rid of that risk with debt, but you can do things to reduce the risk. Like one thing people don't think about is they think we're on a razor thin margin. Well, they don't think about if they raise their price, by a dollar and their costs haven't changed, that full dollars drop into profits. And so you can make these small changes that dollar may double profits, right? And so that doubling of profits means that debt payment is so much easier. And people think that to get to that point you need these really big changes, and they don't see that or think about that. And so by by being able to have had the experience of going through this a lot of different times, we can make these suggestions and really quickly get wins that then immediately have that business owner saying, "Oh, I'm sleeping better." And a lot of times they can even be sleeping better without any other changes, just because they have an understanding, right? And before they didn't have that understanding.
Hey, quick break here. If you're an owner, do you know that most companies will never actually sell? That means that all those years that you put into building your business are for nothing. If you want to build a business that's valuable, that people will want to buy, and you could make potentially millions of dollars from, go to rjhub.com or click in the link below. That's rjhub.com or click on the link below. And now back to the episode.
Well, and I'm guessing just to play that out, let's say that you wanted to raise prices, and you're concerned about, you might lose a certain customer segment. So there's a question of customer concentration. Is it broad enough that,
Yeah.
what that might look like? But then also the ability to say, okay, well, if you have a good customer concentration and you raise prices, just to use what you said, about $1, and you lost 10% of your clientele, your revenue in this case, or clientele, then this is what that means now, right? So if you lost no one, this is what it means. If you lost 30%, so understanding what the numbers might mean and how to roll it out systematically, say, well, we're kind of cautious, we're kind of scared we might lose it. So the most problematic customers we're going to give the dollar to first, and the best customers last, and see how that makes work. That might be a strategy, but at least understanding the true risk of what might happen on the back end if they do cancel or fire you or quit working with you is really important, because people say raise your prices, raise your prices. Like, well, what's the risk involved with raising my prices if people don't accept it and renew with me?
Yeah. And I think it's really, I mean, it's numbers, right? If you raise your prices by a certain amount, that you can do the math and figure out what percentage of clients would you need to lose for you to not be at a better revenue spot. But even if your revenue is not increased, a lot of times, say you had to lose 30% for that revenue to remain flat. Well, you can have 30% less revenue, but have more profit because you kept the most profitable people. And so I think it's that mental gymnastics of running through those scenarios and say, okay, business owner, what is your worst case scenario? What do you think if this price increase were to go as bad as possible, what would that look like? And they'd say, oh, we lose 30%. That's the worst case. I don't think we're so we can run that scenario. And then if you're really still worried, you can do what you mentioned there, which is great, of find a subsegment of people to roll it out on and then test. And then from that test, you see that business owner gain confidence of, oh yeah, I got no negative reaction, or I only got one person, or I, did this. And then from that, they gain confidence. And that is where, again, those numbers can be your security blanket in those situations, because it gives you confidence that you're not blowing the business up. And I think that's a lot of times what people are afraid of, is they think they're going to make this one bad decision, it's going to blow everything up. But with the right plans, with the right kind of process to walk through it, you can kind of mitigate all of those risks and fears.
Yeah, and that's why I try to break it into the two categories. There's numbers and there's people, right? Because the numbers
Yeah.
say you can raise it by this, but the people might not say that, right? They might say no. But if you don't know the numbers, then how the people respond becomes a problem, because you're not sure how many people can get mad or angry or choose not to work with you because you didn't know what the numbers were. And so there's how you handle the people side of it. It's a different conversation probably, but just the core that we've kind of missed this standpoint of, okay, if you know your numbers, and then you can have someone or learn how to manage the people or talk to the customers in this case, that's great. But if you don't know the numbers, talking to the people, you don't know, is it $1 increase, is it $3 increase, is it $10 increase? What are the numbers? And to your point about the subset, if you said, well, these 15 clients are really a pain. Well, instead of the dollar increase for them, you might go 5, because you can lose those 15. If everyone goes for the dollar, you might go 5 with those just to see. And if they all stay, then you're like, okay, we're making really good margin here because they're more
Yeah.
difficult. And so you can start to have those conversations and understand, what it is that you're offering, who you're offering it to, and how it actually impacts your business. And so I can see how you keep referring to them sleeping at night. It's really hard to sleep at night if you don't know whether or not a slight change or a big change even might impact your business, because we think about the people side so much because we're all humans. We just forget that there's this math side. And that math side, it's there and you got to know it.
Yeah. And like, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the merging of those two that's really key. And I think too many from, you know, anyone, I like to say, like, anyone can build a financial model. Like, you can go pay someone to go do that for really, really cheap. It's the decision making partnership that is there that is super, super valuable. Um, and is what I think makes kind of the fractional CFO's relationship unique to the business from really almost any other advisor. So
So someone calls you up right now. It's the day before Thanksgiving. We record this, so it's about next week. But someone calls you up on Monday, we'll say, and they say, "Hey, Curtis, man, I need you to come help my business. How fast can you clean me up?" Like with that's all they say. How fast is this process to start working with the fractional CFO to get things on the right track?
yeah, the first thing we do is we have kind of a assessment call that we do. So that's typically a 2 hour call that we sit on with them. And like I mentioned before, we walk through a process that's called the business model canvas process to understand the business model. And typically on that day, by the time we get to that end of that call, we've identified what are the key things within their business model, what are those key opportunities, and what are the key drivers of their business. And when doing that, we can often immediately come away with 1 to 3 things that they can do that day. Sometimes that is as simple as you've got a bunch of money sitting out there that you've not called anyone on. Let's Next week or tomorrow, you're going to get on the phones and you're going to start calling people, right? Uh, Other times it can be from that we've looked at some key resources or we've looked at some key people that they have, and we say we got to make sure that these things are right. And so we like to work in an initial 30-day sprint, but oftentimes within that first meeting, we're making changes. And then 30 days down the road, um, the goal is that we've implemented a few of those things. We just had someone that we went through this process with, and they're about $1.5 million business. And from a 3 hour call at the beginning, we were able to map out a route to get their profits from about 10 to 15% up to over 25% within a 3 hour call. And in the 60 days since that call, that that person has implemented a handful of those things. And like, for example, that was an assessment that we did, and the revenue generated from that has already been $50,000 in additional revenue because he just implemented one of the things that we said that he should be charging for. And since he started charging for it, he's generated that much. So there's always things like that that you can find that business owners tend to have blind spots to. And that is what we tell people is, like, we promise an ROI. Like, if we can't get you that money back, then we should have never even gone on that call to begin with.
Yeah. No, and this is part of my, I don't know if frustration is the right word, but you'll see people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't pay for advice, you shouldn't get coaching, you shouldn't take courses, you shouldn't do this stuff." And it's like, you can go read books and get YouTube. But I've had conversations with owners, and I had a conversation the other day with a guy, and I said, "Would you pay?" I think it was $500,000. $500,000 if you could get a $2 million return. He said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Okay, cool. Pay me $500,000 and we'll get it done." He goes, "Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure." It's like, right. So you really won't pay $500,000, because we both know, me and him, that there's 100% no guarantee. Like, you can't make anything can happen. But this is the path that would get you there. And we were just having a casual conversation. It wasn't a pitch. Um, but in the world of, advice is everywhere. You can find all kinds of things to do it. But oddly enough, paying someone, having them kind of hold your feet to the fire is really what a lot of us oddly need, because there is a lot of truth that the information is out there, it's free, you can go research it, but that kind of presumes that you know how to ask even the right questions. And a lot of times I wouldn't know, I'm not a fractional
Yeah.
CFO, I wouldn't even know the right questions to even ask. And so I could read a book on finance and go, huh, okay, cool. But you would say, no, Ryan, focus here, here, and here. And I go, oh, I didn't even know to think about that. And I think that kind of gets lost in this stuff. And so to your point about this 3 hour call, I love the sprint mentality because compressing the time means you're more likely to get it done, but also taking the time and showing them here's the 2 or 3 things that you need to do. And would you say it was a 10% increase in margin or something like that?
Yeah, 10% increase in margin and like I said, 50,000 in additional revenue immediately. So
And so I'm sure that client's really happy right now.
yeah, they've been thrilled and it's a fun relationship because when you can, you again, this guy had put money back into his business from his personal bank account to make payroll just a month before, right? And so to be able to now say, oh, you can take that money back out, he's happy and his wife is happy, right? That's a huge win.
That's the wife being happy is a real huge win if you're married. That's
Yeah,
a real
yeah, exactly.
that's a
Now
real
he's
huge
really
win.
sleeping better at night, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing there is you mentioned collection times and terms. You know, there might be some legal stuff, and I'm not going to touch on that, but just the principle of a lot of stuff that owners do is because someone told them to do. They don't understand that no, instead of getting paid 90 days, you can get paid 45. All you got to do is ask, right? All you got to do is just
Yep.
call up and say, hey, we're changing our terms of payment, or however you have that conversation. And if there's no legal things that you're going to get into, you can just change stuff as kind of the saying goes. And it's like, okay, well, someone telling you that makes you feel more confident because they have the experience, the background on how to have those conversations and how to approach that rather than just saying, maybe, and trying to go out there. So bringing that to the table, I'm sure helps owners feel better about what they're going to do as well.
Yeah, well, like a good example of that is there was a guy we worked with a few years back that um, he was really short on cash and he wasn't sure how he was going to make his next tax payment because he just didn't have any cash in the bank. And we started looking at it. He was ordering inventory from overseas and it was taking 180 days to get into his warehouse where he could now sell it. And the problem with that is they were forcing him to pay when he purchased. So that meant he had 180 days of cash locked up. Then his customers were on 30-day terms and he was giving everyone 30-day terms, even if they didn't. So there was a lot of stuff he's not even collecting because he had no relationship with them before just giving them a 30-day term. So all we did through a conversation is said, well, what if we seek out a new supplier or a similar supplier? So he asked some questions, and through asking the questions, he found a supplier for the same product that it took 15 days to get to the warehouse from when he purchased, and he didn't have to pay a dime until it landed in the warehouse. So you add that plus you add the 180 plus the 30, you're at 210 days. We took his cycle from getting his first dollar related to that inventory from 210 days to 45 days if you include the 15, but 30 days if you don't, assuming you change nothing else. And that has transformed his business. That's tripled his cash in just an overnight decision. And you then add that now he only gave terms to repeat customers that he ran through a credit process. And he took he was probably not collecting 5% of his revenue, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot when you grow. And that in and of itself completely transformed his cash position to where he had the money he needed and he was actually able to start taking distributions, which he hadn't been able to take. And it was built out of him growing too quickly. So it was a problem that was he couldn't buy more inventory because he's out of cash because he was growing too quickly. And so these things have real impacts, and it's fun to get to do those and see the way that it impacts that business owner.
Yeah, and that kind of taps into what I was saying a minute ago about the scale at all costs. Like, well, you got to scale, but then as you scale, how do you get from A to B to C to D? And then understanding where you want to stop, that's a different question. But at least getting from A to B, you got to understand, oh, wait, I can shorten the terms here and change the terms there and redo this. And so it's a thing that you hear people say, well, scale, raise prices. Like, well, okay, that's kind of just buzzwords. Like, how do you actually do those things? How could you shorten your terms? And so in that case, I don't know if they raise prices or not, but you it's just from what you've told me, it doesn't sound like they even need to raise prices to put cash in the bank. Like this is shorten the
Yeah.
terms. A lot of cash is coming in, which is huge. The same number, the same dollars at the end of the day, potentially, but it's just faster. And you talk about, debt, as we mentioned, or taxes. All of a sudden, you have the capacity to pay that, and not instead of having to go to the bank for a loan or use your personal
Well,
credit card.
yeah, and I think he didn't have a line of credit, so his other option was to get a line of credit, and that would have cost him money and interest, which is going to lower the amount that he gets overall. So by making that change, we did ultimately get him a line of credit, but it was to facilitate future growth, and he then needed to use it less than he would have before because of that. So yeah, and banking is huge for people. I don't know, like you speak to customer concentrations, like typically banks will only allow you to pull 20 to 25% of the line based off of one customer. But if you find the right banking relationships, I've had banks that allowed the line to be 80%, 90% of one customer. And well, that completely transformed that business because now they have access to a lot more cash as they move. And so, yeah, these are things that they're, until you've gone through it, it's hard to know what it's like. And so that's where the value of that is.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about being exit ready.
Yeah.
As I use the term, it doesn't mean you have to sell. It just means building the business that can be sold. Because as you know, if someone came to you tomorrow that said they want to buy, or one of your customers called and said, I got an offer to sell my company, it's not closing on Tuesday. It's a process, 6, 9, 12 months before checks or cash and stuff like that. So it's a process. So if someone's thinking about being exit ready, from the fractional CFO standpoint, how far in advance do they need to clean the books up and work on some of these payment cycles? Because if going back to your 180-day plus the 30 or 45-day analogy you just gave, that's something that can improve your value because the cash is coming in faster. Whereas the new the new buyer goes, wait, I got to buy this company and I've got to wait, 210 days to get paid. That's a long time. I'm not wanting that. I want the money now. And so, from a preparation for thinking about being exit ready, whether you exit or not, how important is it to start getting your books and your fractional CFO kind of mindset in place?
Well, obviously, for us, we'd love for you to be that way all the time, right? Um, I think realistically, you need at least to be able to go back to a year's worth of records. That's all going to depend on where their taxes are, what all those things are, of what records can we manipulate or change to get it to look a specific way. But even more than getting the books to the point where they're technically exit ready, is it's setting up the systems so that the things can easily be passed off. And you may say, well, like, I don't need to do that because I'm not trying to sell, but it goes to what you're saying of being exit ready all the time. When you make that change, you change the business from being solely reliant on you to now being able to put people in those other positions, right? And so I have a lot of business owners that they're the only ones who sign checks and have the relationships, right? And you have to get them out of that mentality because the reality is, even if they've not documented anything, they have rules and things that they abide by. So a lot of the exit ready from a financial standpoint is getting the profitability to a point where you're increasing your multiple, right? And that can be done through coaching and a lot of that can be done really quickly. But then the other side of that is getting all the documentation and processes and systems in place. Because when those systems are in place, that so let's use an example. Say you're a 10% profit company and you're going to sell on a 3 times multiple. You have $1 million of profit, you're going to sell it 3 million, right? And obviously you can get into EBITDA, you can get into all these other deals, doesn't matter, right? For this example. um, but if you now increase that profit to you now increase that profit to 20% and you're getting 2 million, you've now doubled that valuation. But because that profitability is higher, they also have a larger margin for error, which means they might even give you a larger multiple than what they initially gave you. So now instead of 3 times, they may give you 3.5 or 4, right? And so now you've taken that from a 3 million exit to a 8 million exit with just nothing, very little, difference in that change. You now take that, you put the systems in place and the processes in place, and it's all documented. In every question they ask, you have stuff prepared that they can see. As they get that higher level of confidence, you may have a range of 3 to 5. Well, now they're going to pay 5 versus that 3, right? So, you know, people like to, fractional CFO engagements are not cheap, right? Anywhere from 3 to 10,000, even 15,000 a month, depending on the business and the size and all the stuff. But the reality is that with a lot of these things, you're increasing the multiple that you can get. And it's an order of magnitude larger than anything that you're ever going to see come out from something that has been paid for that particular engagement. And I think people miss that, because not only does that prepare you for that higher multiple, but if you're less stressed as a business owner, you have less day-to-day involvement. What does that mean? You have more opportunity to go grow the business, right?
Yeah.
There's less pressure on you to do other stuff, and now you can focus on growth. Now you imagine that higher multiple. Maybe you never thought you were going to sell, but now you're growing at a 50% clip or 20% clip, where before you couldn't grow that quickly because you're sitting there doing the day-to-day work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you grow in the business, that multiple goes up as well, because often as you get to higher numbers, those multiples go up because people have more trust in those, and you get to a different level of buyers. So there's just so many benefits from that. And I've talked to a number of owners that didn't think they ever wanted to sell, but as they started looking at the numbers, and they're like, well, actually, if I could get that number, I might be
Right.
interested, right? And they didn't
Right.
think it was in reality an option before.
Yeah.
So
Well, if we go back to what I was saying a minute ago about the money and the human side. Okay, so if you just said the high end of what you just said there, so $200,000 a year to net an extra million. So let's take that out. So that's $800,000. So you paid 200,000 to net an extra 800,000. So you went from 1 to 2, and then you paid that, so 1.8 million. Okay, but if you sold, you said you went from 3 to 5, right? Or maybe 6, or maybe 7, depending on what's going on there. And so on the math side, you can see how it works out. But as you said multiple times, the ability to not be just feel the pressure of, can I make payroll? Can I pay the note for the debt? Can I do this? Can I do that? That pressure side, that's the human side that you have to deal with, or your spouse
yeah,
may be putting on you because they're worried about a vacation or buying a home or paying the taxes or whatever it might be, that they don't have to worry about retirement. And so it does go to both sides. And so once you understand the math, then you can begin to understand the people side. Um, and so if you keep the business because you go, well, I'm netting an extra $1 million before I pay this fractional CFO in this case, cool, keep it, run the business. Why not? You just netted extra $800,000 or $1 million or whatever it might be. And if you do go to sell, now you know that instead of getting 3 million, you get 5 or 6 or whatever it might be. And so people don't really understand in the M&A world that the numbers are really big, right? They're really big. And so once you start to pull the right levers, it's not like you're saying, hey, here's how to make an extra 10K a month. I mean, sometimes that's all you can do for some owners because they're stuck. But it's not like that's not the pitch. That's not what's being said here. It's like, no, this is how you improve $1 million, $500,000, $3 million in your value, in your cash flow, and whatever it might be. And you got to understand that that's really what's being discussed in a lot of these conversations. And a lot of education is more for the people who haven't gotten to that level. And so I don't think owners really understand really what's sitting there on the table for them, because these terms aren't really talked about by the big influencer. I'll say the big influencers are targeting the people trying to get to 10, 20, 30K a month. It's like, no. That's great. Those people need guidance, but this is a different, these are people who are a little bit more further along is what we're talking about.
yeah. Well, I mean, you can't separate the people. I think this is the case, and don't quote me on this, but I think it's entrepreneurs have like the highest percentage of divorce, out of anyone, right? And or out of most, I mean, a pretty high level of divorce. Well, if you get divorced and half of that has to go to that other spouse, not only are you costing, that's costing you a lot of money, but it's upending your life, right? And it's changing your ability to grow and move that business. Whereas if you prepare for exit, the impact of that change in role that it can have if done well, the reduction of stress is going to allow you to be there more for your family, is going to lead to better outcomes with both you and your spouse and your children. It has all of these secondary effects that I think are often missed because you're just too busy. Just like, I got to get this done today. I got to get this done this week. And it's too busy, too easy to be just in that moment.
No, yeah. When we were focusing on giving owners time back, that was kind of my thing a few months ago.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, that was part of the impetus was you've seen the divorce numbers. You realize that owners, if they understood what was going on, they actually could delegate, they could do stuff and get their time back. And it just didn't resonate with owners well enough. And then I had the big M&A deal closed and said, okay, I'm just going to focus on the exit ready mentality because that actually encapsulates the same thing. It's just from a different perspective, right? It's the same
Yeah.
principle. It's just a different perspective. I was trying to explain that to someone the other day. They go, "Are you doing something new?" I'm like, well, it's the same thing. It's just talking about it differently because
Yeah.
this is what people understand better. And so, but no, because we looked at some of those divorce stats and stuff like that, and it's like, man, this is this is really sad. There's no reason that marriage. I've been married 19 years with my wife now and love her to death, and she's the best thing ever happened to me. So, um, but my parents were divorced, so I've gone through that as a kid, and so there's a lot of trauma that's involved for families like that. You know, two Christmases, we're day before Thanksgiving, two Thanksgivings, two Easters, but all that stuff becomes up, and it goes on for the rest of your life. And so, if you're allowing your business to cause extra stress, as hard enough as it is, as you know, causing extra stress that you don't have to let it cause, then you're setting yourself up potentially to you know find yourself in divorce, which is not good. We don't
Yeah.
want that. That's not what we want. And so, understanding this, going back, now this is kind of that human side, right? This is how it impacts that human side, whether it's an employee or your personal relationship. This is how you can make it better for everyone. Okay, so with that being said, um, give people a preview for the week that you're teaching the cohort. What are you going to be talking about, and what can they expect?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about, like, there's a lot of great experts on there, lawyers and other people that can talk about that. I am going to focus on what are the financial things you can do to build yourself a better business and the financial infrastructure behind that. Because I think it's easy to think, I don't know my numbers, I'm never going to understand my numbers. But the reality is, within most businesses, there's a handful of really small drivers and things that, if you understand those things really well, that can lead to those financial results. So since we're talking exit ready and that, I'm going to connect that financial infrastructure to exit ready and try and get you some real practical things that you can do immediately, and a list of those that are going to get you, again, that higher multiple, all of those things that we talked about here.
And I know I'm biased because I'm putting this on, but I think we have seriously.
Dude,
I don't know if it, it's
I'm like looking
an
at that list and I'm like, this is an amazing group. I mean, to honestly, like, I bet most of that group I've had conversations with at different points, and
Mhm.
you included all of those people. I'm like, I came away from those conversations with those people. I'm like, these are some of the smartest people I've ever met, So
Yeah.
it's like, when I saw the people on there, I was like, holy smokes, this is going to be huge for this. And whatever stage you're at, if this is even an inkling of interest, if you have that business that fits that criteria, man, like, do it immediately. Because I think uh, it goes back to what we've talked about, that ROI. Whatever you spend on this, I mean, you're going to get a multiple on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No matter what, if you take one piece of action, you don't even need, if you showed up one time to any
Yeah.
of those, you're
Yeah.
going to get your money back. You
Yeah.
don't even have to be there just one time. I bet you can do one thing from one of those presentations. That's just, it's a great group, and excited to be a part of it.
Well, I'm so excited that you're a part of it. And I was really hoping that I didn't have to teach because I had such an amazing lineup of people. And I'm like, these dudes are all better at me than they're specialized and stuff. And so I was like, okay, if I can just fill it out with 10, that'd be great. And so
Yeah.
super excited. Like I said, I am biased, but when you have, Clint Fourier, Robert Sterling, co-founders Nick, he's coming from a different perspective is because he's going to bring in kind of he's bought and sold. So the owner's perspective, like you got yourself. And so you got all these people in here. And it's like, man, this is going to be a good event. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited to have you a part of it and looking forward to this. And we have finalized your date. I know we haven't finalized that. So we'll finalize your date here next week or so we can put that on the calendar. Or if we have, just tell me I forgot. But And
No,
then,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
good. We'll get that finalized so people can find out when you'll be talking that week because it's gonna be a good event. So I'm really excited about it, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
absolutely looking forward to it. And yeah, happy to help any way I can.